This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Today we have a guest who has a lot of experience in magic in general, but in particular in strolling magic. He does stage illusions on cruise ships and in casinos and a lot of other places, but really his bread and butter is strolling. And he has recently completed a book called Strolling for Dollars. And I don't like for this podcast to be something that is a promotional or advertising tool, particularly just about one thing. And and that's not what this is. This is not an ad. You will hear him talking about his book during this our conversation, but it's important because of a couple things. One is the subject, and that has to do with strolling and how there are different ways of trying to get involved into making money as a strolling magician, and then also because we're going to be giving away a copy of one of his books. So anyhow, Jason Bird is someone who lives in Las Vegas and again travels around the country and performing at casinos and different locations for corporate groups, doing after dinner speaking as keynote speaker or doing his magic after dinner, but then also primarily doing strolling magic for these during companies, during cocktail parties, etc. So there are a lot of things that he has to share with us here this week, and that you don't have to buy the book to learn some of these tips that he's going to be talking about here. Plus, also, I speak to begin with in the early part of this about Caesar's magical empire. I always find that is a fascinating subject that existed for about a half dozen years at a point in time in the late 90s, early 2000s, that was originated by Milt Larsen. And there are a lot of magicians who had worked there at one time or another and got their start, and others who were big time magicians at the time, like Jonathan Pendragon and Max Maven, et cetera, et cetera. Mark and Ginger. Mark Kalin and Ginger. There is a lot that he talks about here about that, as well as, again, just working and strolling environment and tricks to do and approaches to the group and how to handle them, etc. So he's got some good tips and advice, I think, that we can all use, those who do close-up magic and those who might be interested in trying to earn money from that as well. So please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Jason Bird, here on The Magic Word. Jason Bird, that's a name that you might think of immediately thinking, okay, the guy's a dove magician, works with ducks and geese or birds or whatever, and perhaps another Channing Pollock, James Mayer, different kinds of people who are doing birds. This guy handles birds, but not only that, he goes much beyond that. There are a lot of people of us who are out there with heads down, who are working, who are not necessarily as well known in the magic community. Specifically, You don't see these guys necessarily on the cover of Genie Magazine, Linking Ring, MUM, etc. However, that they are the working pros who are working on cruise ships, they're doing cocktail parties, they're after dinner speakers, even working stages in Las Vegas and elsewhere in casinos, and I guess maybe even Foxwood, and occasionally being on television like this, like Jason has been on the Masters of Illusion, and so you may have seen him there, but he's just not a household name necessarily the way that obviously David Copperfield would be, or some other names, and perhaps that might be just because, again, that a lot of magicians are familiar with those who are in the zeitgeist, who are talked about because they're at conventions or they are out on lecture tours or whatever. As I said, this guy's making a living, and a successful one, doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of his success, and how also that perhaps you might be able to follow his lead and find some success in certain parts of your magic then as well. He resides in Las Vegas and is out touring actually and traveling a little bit then right now and performing on some stages out on the East Coast. So welcome, my friend, please, Mr. Jason Bird. Hey there, Jason. How are you?
Hello. Nice to see everybody. Nice to see you, Scott.
Thank you. Good to see you then as well. So
Yeah.
I mentioned that you haven't really gone to a lot of conventions. I don't recall, have there been many conventions or any where you have headlined and performed?
I'm trying to, I don't think I've headlined any conventions. I've been a dealer at a few. I've been to Blackpool and Magic Live. I used to produce magic effects a few years ago. I released one called Money Morphosis, where the dollar bill folds into the butterfly. People
Oh,
might
sure.
remember that
I
one.
do. I didn't know that was yours. That I love
Yeah, that
that
was
trick.
mine. And
Okay.
what and Stellar, the card clip that like the stars formed into their card after they it's like a card reveal but in built inside of the card clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was mine. So yeah, so I've been to many conventions, but yeah, never headlined one. So
And do you lecture also as well or teach other magicians?
I do through now that I've learned it, I've met a lot of magicians through selling this book, and I do private consulting, coaching, things like that
Yeah.
now, for sure. Yeah.
But in Las Vegas, you've headline, I know, like over 6,000 shows there. Has it been the same casino or same venue, or where have you been?
All different, all
Hmm.
different. I moved to Las Vegas in 1998, but I've been the house magician at the Aladdin, the Venetian. I worked at Caesar's Magical Empire when that was going. That's how I got to see all the greats perform on stage. So there's you would honestly be hard pitched to find a casino I haven't actually worked at in one capacity or another.
Yeah, the Caesar's Magical Empire was certainly a unique point in time. I would like to kind of, since you mentioned that and you were involved with that, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that because I remember some of the people who have been performing out there, Charles Bach and John Chirac and Max Maven and
Yep.
so many others that were Jonathan Pendragon. Were
Yeah.
you doing close up in the restaurants or explain to people
Yeah.
what that was like? Also, what that was. Milt Larson had built that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that started yeah, the brainchild you called it, and they built it was like a $70 million production at Caesar's Palace, and it used the same illusion that the a haunted mansion uses, where it makes you feel like you've kind of gone underground.
Hmm.
So they made you think that you were going underground at Caesar's, and there was all these catacombs and dining chambers, and then there was this big center area where this big fire show happened, and then that's where all the kind of the theaters went off from. So there was a close-up magic theater, there was the stage show, and then there were performers that were in the middle area that did strolling walk-around magic, and that was kind of my first professional magic gig, which is a pretty good place to start.
Wow, what a wide place to start. Exactly.
Yeah, doing walk around magic. And but yeah, I got to sneak in and I saw, Jeff McBride and Kalen and Ginger and the Pendragons and all these big names that I just, looked up to
Mhm.
and got to see them night in and night out. And then I did strolling magic, and that's how kind of I started. I mean, I had been doing strolling magic before, like in my hometown before I moved to Las Vegas, but that was the big time, with getting to do that. So um, that was kind of my first taste of like real professional strolling walk around magic and the things that it takes to be a good walk around strolling performer, the kinds of effects that you do, audience management, like all those kinds of things that now, geez, I hate to say, it, but almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, some things that get ingrained that you never forget.
Yeah.
I don't perform as much as I used to, but I was recently, well, just this like Saturday, actually doing a strolling engagement for about 200 plus people for a couple of hours, and it was just like riding a bike. I mean, people were saying, "Wow, how many years you been doing this?" I said, "Well, it's been a year and a half since I last did it." It said, "It looks like you just did it this afternoon." I mean, everything just kind of fell into place once you kind of know the rhythm and everything. I want to get into that a little bit later, but going still sticking on Caesars, did you do any illusions at the time, or were you specifically just doing close up?
That at that time I was fresh 19 years old. I moved to Vegas when I turned 18. I said, "Mom, Dad, I'm moving to Vegas. That's where all the magicians live."
Wow.
They
Okay.
they love to hear that.
Yeah. Of course they did. Yeah. We were expecting you to be a
I
doctor, but okay, a magician. This is
Well,
the second
I
best.
promised I would go to law school, so I actually went to UNLV. I was pre-law at UNLV, so that was the trade-off. But then I started doing, so many shows, and for a while it was mainly close up, and then I started adding more like stand-up parlor type effects, to what I was doing, and then eventually, when the call comes from like a Masters of Illusion or an AGT or whatever, and they want you to do, bigger stuff, I did my bird act. It's the one bird act that I've done a couple bird acts, but this is the one that really kind of made me known, which is called Mr. Kindness, which is the old woman on the park bench, and I make pigeons. I produce pigeons, make pigeons appear for her, and they start eating the bird seed that she throws down. And let me tell you, working with pigeons is a whole different thing than working with doves.
Tell me about that. Why are they different?
Well, first of all, they're the size of chickens, so to hide them is not quite as easy as just putting on a vest. And the other thing, the other challenge I gave to myself was that I wanted to do it without a coat on. So if you watch the video from the TV show or wherever, I have my jacket over my shoulder and I take it off and I produce all the birds with no jacket on at all. So, and then I changed the old woman into a dove at the very end. And it's a very just beautiful story. I like the storytelling type of, magic where it really kind of weaves it magic into like a cool, nice or touching story. So, that was kind of the bird act that kind of brought me to fame. But even still to this day, I still make a good portion of my living, even though I perform on cruise ships and I do, whatever, I still make a good portion of my living doing strolling magic, because there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of people that's what they want.
Hmm.
2 nights ago, I was just at Allegiant Stadium and making thousands of dollars for a couple hours of strolling magic, just because that's what people want.
Right,
So
right.
and that was part of why I wrote the book too, is that to show exactly what you said at the very top, which is there's a whole bunch of people that you've never heard of that are making a very comfortable living doing the tricks you probably already know.
Hmm.
So so not to get discouraged, but some people just lack the roadmap on how to get there. So that's why I wrote it.
The title of the book is what?
Strolling for dollars. So there it is,
Hmm.
583 pages of it, and it's everything. So the book is mainly three parts. The first part is what magic to do, how do you pick your tricks, how do you pick your outfit, how do you decide on your character, how do you manage your audience. So it's all the magic part of it. So and then the second part is all the business side. So it's how to interact with clients, how to write contracts, how to, from taxes to emails to finding leads, finding work, dealing with, destination management companies, all the business kind of stuff that actually most magicians are not that good at. So this is kind of a roadmap for that too. And then the third part of the book is interviews. I interviewed 12 of some of the best walk-around magicians on the planet, people like David Penn and Paul Draper and Joan Decor and Derek Ostavani. All these people, some you've probably heard, some you might not have heard. And that's part of the point, is that it's people that you might not know, but they're out there making a living doing it, and you can too.
Right. Still staying on the with the Caesar's Magical Empire, as I
Mhm.
recall that they talk about the different rooms where you would go back into strolling because they
Yep.
had it was a dinner theater too that they
Yep.
had like a room and there was some guy who would go in and I understand he was a kind of a comedian and not necessarily a magician.
Yeah, so they were the dinner. So you would go, I think they had 12 dining chambers. So you would sit down. I mean, this whole experience took like 3.5 hours. It was incredible. It was very cool. But you would go in the first part, you would go and have dinner, and during the show, you would have the wizard, and he was like your dining wizard. And so he did a whole scripted show. Can't remember if there was much singing or not, but it was a little bit of singing. Magic happened inside of the room. He or she did their own magic. They could bring it to their own show. And then from there, when you were finished with dinner, then you would go out into this big center area. And then there was and everything looked like it was rock face and it looked like an old catacombs, like you were underground. And then there would be a huge fire show in the middle. And then off to one side had what's called the Secret Pagoda, which would be like the close-up magic theater that held like 60, 65 people. And then you had the Palace of Mystery, that was on the other side, and that was double that size, and that's where you would see like your Pendragons and your Kalen and Gingers and Jeff McBride and things like that. So to make your way through the whole attraction, it was like 3.5, and you didn't have to leave. You could hang out. There were bars, magic bars. Max Maven, they made a little hologram Max Maven behind the bar, one of the bars.
I heard about that.
That would actually do a magic trick for you. So there was just and you, like I said, you never had to leave. You could just hang out and just, if that's how you wanted to spend your whole evening, you could just hang out there all night. So it was a pretty unique, cool place.
And was it just one price? In other words, you pay X dollars?
Yeah, it was just one price. You paid one price, and that was dinner and all the shows you wanted to watch.
Then
Like I
cash
said, you
bar.
could even hang out, and if it was the switch over between the two stage shows, you see the last one of one set, and then hang around, have a drink, and then go see the first set of the next person that was performing. So you really got your money's worth, in my opinion. It was really cool.
It seems like when I was talking with Charles Bach about him working there,
Yeah.
that he just was responding to the call. There was some, I guess, almost like a casting call, and they said we were
Yep.
putting it out to all magicians, and whoever wants to come in, we'll interview all takers. Is that kind of how that you came about?
That's how the original. So when they originally started, that's what they did. They looked for actors. That's what they were really looking for, and they
Now,
were
he
going to
was a
take,
dancer, I think, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
actors slash dancers, like something else, and then they were going to just teach them magic. And so there were actually only very few actual magicians that made the cut to become one of the wizards. So I was one of the center performers, so I was never one of the dinner wizards. So there you had to have some acting and singing ability, and they did open casting calls for thousands of people, like across the whole country and
Wow.
Canada. I mean, I think, is Charles from Canada, or am I thinking of Bram Charles? Anyway, so it was a wide net that they cast to try to find these people, and only a couple of them were actually magicians. Most of them were just actors, and they taught them how to do magic. And but that's where I first met Charles. He was one of the dinner wizards, and then I was one of the strolling magicians. The strolling magicians, they were hiring magicians, so that was a little bit of a different process. But yeah, I got to meet and still friends to this day with many people that I met there.
So the Strolling magicians, did they come and go, or were they working like for a month at a time, or were they resident there for the
They were
duration?
resident. They
Okay.
were resident there until either they left or it wasn't like a few week contract.
Okay.
Those performers, it wasn't like, the theater, you were there for like a week or 2 weeks. You had a set schedule because they rotated the big
That makes sense.
marquee names. But the inside people, like the dining room wizards, they were there. Some people were there the entire run of the entire attraction, and then we called it the hub, but it was like this big center area with the big fire show.
Uh-huh.
Those people, like, same thing. They stayed as long as they wanted to, and we had actually a little bit more job security than the people in the theaters.
And what were the years that was open?
That opened, I want to say it opened in like 96. I moved in 98, and then it was open until I want to say like 2000, 2005, 2004,
So it
something
was
like
quite a
that.
while.
Yeah, it was open for a while.
Hmm.
And I mean, everybody loved it, and it was really all the behind the scenes stuff that kind of made it end, unfortunately. But it was universally loved by everybody who went there.
I was going to ask you about the demise. I was thinking it was because they decided they were. I think that's where they put the Celine Dion
That's
theater.
exactly that was the final nail in the coffin. Celine Dion came in and said, "That's where I want to do." It's funny, before they got rid of it, she had rented out the entire Magical Empire to do her wedding renewal ceremony with
Hmm.
her husband Renee, and so they hired me to be the strolling magician at her wedding reception inside of the Magical Empire. So I got to
Oh,
do magic for Celine Dion and like all of her friends and everything like that. But yeah, it was kind of a shame that she loved it so much that she wanted to tear the whole thing down to build her
man.
showroom.
Yeah. Well, she had a lot of not just chutzpah, but I guess she had uh,
Money. We call that money, Scott. That's called money.
there you go. Yes. Yeah. And people wanted to see her. So, yeah,
Yeah,
so that
right.
was the end of that. That was
Right.
but that was great that it lasted so long, and there really hasn't been anything like that since. I was just
No.
talking with someone recently about Siegfried and Roy because how they had actually broken open the stage for magic to follow in Las Vegas because
Right.
prior to them, there were magicians who were working close up, obviously, Jimmy Grippo and Johnny Paul and some others, but there really weren't any stage magicians until
Right.
they were there. And then once
Yep.
they came in, and I guess they were in Hallelujah Hollywood, and one thing led to another, and then just kind of opened the door, broke it open wide for other
Yep.
magicians then to come in. So is that along about the time also that you decided, hey, I want to start going from close up into stage, or was it because that a company came to you and said, hey, we want you to do a stage illusion, and the answer is always yes, and so you went and bought something, or how'd that come about?
Well, first of all, you said the right words. You always say yes, and then figure it out afterwards.
Yeah.
But when I first started magic, I wanted to be a stage magician. I thought that was where it was it. I saw all the world's greatest magic TV specials on TV. I saw Lance Burton's special. I went and saw him when he was at the Hacienda before he went to the Monte Carlo, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So I was always working up towards that. But that's why I kind of bring up the book again because it's such a good stepping stone. Even if you want to become that, to be able to make a living doing close-up magic can get you there. Now I do shows. I mean, I've made CEOs appear in helicopters, on stage, and I've done all the big stuff, and it's because I kind of was able to stay in the magic game because I was doing walk around magic. And it's only because the market is just so much bigger.
Hmm.
There's so many more people hiring um, uh, strolling magicians than there are stage magicians. So it's just a
There's
numbers
more
game. It's just
work.
there's a lot more work,
Yeah.
so you can still be doing magic as much as you want. And then if your dreams are to, do bigger and bigger things, then it's a great way to do that. So
So how do you make that leap um, for the understanding of your client to know that you do also this other thing? In other words, you're performing on stage and they see you as a great performer, after dinner speaker, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but you also can do close up strolling during their cocktail. And how do you get them to get you booked that and vice versa? If you're doing cocktails and then you're thinking, they should be also booking me for this as well, but they only see you in this particular thing. I guess it's kind of like Hollywood. It's kind of like if they hire someone, it's like they like them because they like my beard, but
right,
it's
right.
but other people won't hire me
Typecasting.
because they don't like the beard. Well, I can shave it off, they
Right.
don't think about the next step. So how do you make that leap for
The,
them to
the
know?
the short answer is you tell them. You have to educate them. I go over that in the book is that most people have never hired a magician before, so they don't know what's possible. They don't know what the options are. They don't know, I mean, next to nothing about it. So when I get a lead, I get somebody calling. Usually they know if they want a show or if they want strolling magic. But sometimes even they don't. So what I'll do is I'll say, if they call me and it's for a stage show, and I can say, for a little bit extra, I can do some strolling magic. I can do some walk around magic for an hour before my show starts and charge you X amount. And if I'm getting paid well for the stage show, sometimes I'll even offer to do it for free and to sweeten the deal, just to get them to hire me to do the stage show. Or if they're hiring me to just do strolling, I'll say, I don't know if you've thought about this, but I could do, if I come to find out there's only 40 people at this event and they're like, "Oh, we want a magician for 2 hours," I'll probably suggest to them, "Look, it, for the same money, Why don't I come and do a 30, 35-minute show? And that way everybody gets to see everything that I do. That's a key phrase for people because
Hmm.
people are afraid that people are going to miss out on things. So a lot of it is just educating them. So I always give them the option. Usually if I'm dealing with my stage show, I'll give them three options. It's the magic, supersize, medium, and small, kind of version. You always push them towards kind of the middle one. So I'll say, this is my basic package, this is this package, and you get this, and this, and then you give them one that's like the crazy price.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, they'll take the crazy price. So you
Yeah.
never know. So that's why you got to throw it out there. But yeah, it's just educating them, just telling them. So, because some people, some of my advertising has to do with, I'm the best strolling magician out there, and then some of my advertising, I'm the best stage magician out there. And so it depends which channel, kind of how they find me, and then I'll just educate them on the other part of it. I also do this, and then they'll be like, "Oh, wow, that sounds kind of cool. That might be interesting. Maybe we should do that." and
Hmm.
and it kind of gets their wheels turning. But that's kind of the short answer is you got to tell them, you got to let them know all the different things that you
That's a
do.
good idea. And then also after your show is over, when they are saying, wow, that was great, we really love the show, et cetera, said, well, I can come back next year, not only with an all new show, but here's another option that you
Yep.
can also have me do this. Really hadn't really thought about you doing that, you
Yep.
know.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's, and that's exactly how it happens. So, because I, I think magicians, just like in a lot of other weird areas, get penalized in these kind of weird different ways. But one of them is that, oh, if I've seen your show once, I've seen it, so I don't have to hire you again. um, which you wouldn't really say that about a singer. Like, of course, yeah, go up there and sing your songs. Like,
Right.
they don't say like, "Oh, I've heard that song before." So it is kind of weird that way with magic. But that's why I make it a special point when I do after my show is I say, I'm constantly changing my show all the time. So if you want to bring me back next year, you'll see all of the favorites. You'll see all the best stuff that I did. But I'm always changing my show, so you're guaranteed to say something, to see something new.
Hmm.
So it just you plant that seed in their mind of like, oh, okay, this isn't going to be the exact same show that we saw. It's going to be better or different, or give them a reason to hire you again.
That's a good point because sometimes they're thinking like if you were a singer, you're going to come back and sing some of the same songs that they've heard. And so it's like, okay, well, we've already heard Chicago, so we're going to go and hear
Right.
Pink Floyd. I don't know if we're going to, you want to hear something a little bit different. Well, Chicago could do a whole different set, the next
Right.
year or whatever.
Yep.
So the same way there. It reminds me a little bit. I remember with America's Got Talent when Dave and Dania were doing their quick change on there, and they were going forward, and then Simon was saying, "Well, it was the same thing you did last week. You just changed clothes, just quickly." It's like, and he was saying, "Yeah, but people are singing a song also, just a different song." I
Yeah.
mean, people are still singing. I mean, we're doing a quick change, but we're doing using different kinds of clothing and methods, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to get the public to differentiate sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and it's just baked into what we do. I mean, you can either scream and rail against it, or you can just accept it. And it's framing, like they answered it the perfect way. Like, look, this is what we do. We're just gonna do it in a different way. That'd be like saying like, yeah, like you said, like to a singer, you'd be like, oh, you're gonna sing a song again? Oh, like,
Yeah,
no, it's a different song. It's totally,
yeah.
So, you can either fight it or you can go with it.
That's true. Now, as far as close-up goes, adding that to cruise ships, typically people don't, I should say people, cruise ship directors and the agents don't hire for close-up, they hire for stage.
Uh-huh.
And in some cases, I know they've told me, said, well, we don't want you to do close-up. I said, well, I can also, work the tables. No, we want you just to do this only.
Right.
And so, and other times they'll say, well, if it works, then that's fine. But how do you go about when you're working cruises, or do you do any close up on cruises as well?
I do in my show. I don't
But
do
not on
any
the tables.
I don't do any strolling on cruise
That's what I
ships.
meant.
Yeah, it's just my show. But with technology nowadays, I do a few close-up effects in my stage show. I have a GoPro camera that I put over my close-up table, and then that just gets fed HDMI into their house system. And they have, I do my wild card, and it's bigger than all my other props. I use a
Yeah.
drone. I do my drone card trick, and this screen plays bigger than even that because it just blown up so big. So sometimes
Hmm.
it's people's guest favorite part of the show because it's like they're watching a giant TV screen and the cards are 10 feet tall when it's on that big giant screen. But yes, for cruise ships is a little bit different. You do have to definitely call yourself a stage magician and then kind of sneak your way into doing some close up into your
Hmm.
stage show. So
Hmm.
um, I, so a lot of the stuff I do, I can do an entire show if I don't have my camera just in case, but it's a better show and it's more texture. But so I'll do a few things that are stage or parlor size stuff, and then I'll go over and sit down at the table and then tell a story. And I do my coin matrix or my wild card or whatever the close up effect is, and it gets thrown up on the screen. And then I walk away from the little table, and then I go back into like another stage effect. So it's definitely possible. My friend Greg Gleason, he brags all the time about how he can go on a cruise ship, and make X amount of money with nothing but a deck of cards in his pocket.
Hmm.
I'm skeptical. Even if I could watch a 45-minute show if it was just card tricks, but he claims people like it. So, and I'm not one to doubt Greg. So,
Yeah,
so it works for him. But it is possible. So, but I mean, he's been in that industry for decades. So people really trust him, and they
that's
they
true.
they know he's going to do a good show. So it is a trust thing, and you got to know your agents well, and the agents have to have a good relationship with the cruise lines, and there's some politics involved with it. So
You mentioned about the drone that as well. That what I saw one of the clips on your website, it looked like instead of a card on ceiling, it was a card on drone.
that's
Uh,
it. Yeah, it's card
Pretty
stab with a drone.
pretty
Yeah,
darn cool. Uh,
yeah.
so is that something that you had come up with? Is that a marketed trick or?
Well, that I came up with that. Drone stab is what I called it. I wanted to do a card stab, but I wanted to update it for present day. So I was like, well, nobody carries swords around anymore, but everybody knows what a drone is now. So I came up with a method to do card stab, but with a drone. So you throw the whole deck in the air, and then you catch the card with the drone up in the air, and it gets stabbed on the foot of the drone
Mhm.
up, 10, 12 feet up in the air. In fact, Penn and Teller did it on their show not that long ago. So that one's taken me around the world. That's one of the ones that got me on in the stage show of Masters of Illusion at Bally's, and that one's I still love doing it. The port agents don't like it that much because if they catch me with a drone, they
Really?
confiscate it, and then
Why?
there's most ports have a no drone policy.
Hmm.
So usually what happens is I'll get it. This is what used to happen is the ports would see it on their scanners, and then they would take the drone. They would still give it to the ship, but then I would have to go hunt it down from either head of security or the cruise or entertainment director and go get my drone. And once they knew I was in the show, then it was like, okay, it's fine, take it. But sometimes that would take me hours. And if I was on that night, the night I got on the ship, sometimes it was cutting it close to the ship. So I probably shouldn't even be saying this on this podcast. But so now what I do is I completely disassemble my drone and I spread it through all of my
That's what I would
luggage.
do. That's
So
first thing I thought of is just kind of
so
just
when it goes through this, so when it goes through the X-rays and all that, it doesn't
sure.
look like anything. And then when I get back to my cabin, I just put it all back together, and then it's ready for the show.
Yeah, yeah. Just kind of like the man with the golden gun that had the lighter and the pen and
Right?
just all makes a gun out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Exactly what it is.
Well, that is a fantastic trick, but I didn't know that they would not allow drones. They allow them on the ship or not even on the ship.
No, they don't allow them on the ship, but passengers are not allowed to bring drones.
What are they afraid of, or what's the deal?
I'm sure somebody at some point messed it up for somebody and crashed it into somebody
Huh.
or something. Just a kind of a funny side story about the drone. So I got hired by a company to do a show at this was weirdly at Caesar's Palace, and everything was fine, everything's set to go. And then about a week before the show happened, I get a call from the client, from the corporate client, and they said, "Hey, we told Caesars that you were going to be using a drone in the show, and they are freaking out. They're demanding that you get like this, that, and the insurance. And I said, well, I already carry a $3 million, performance and
Right.
liability. And so they went back and forth, and they said, yeah, that's not enough. I had to go get two more insurance policies
Holy
because
cow.
apparently the story was somebody. Like the week before this happened, somebody on some Caesar's property was flying a drone and crashed it into somebody and almost took a woman's eye out. And so they happened to be hyper aware of drones at the moment. So I had to go get two extra insurance policies. So between the three policies, I was covered for $23 million
Wow.
to do a card trick.
Now that is funny. $23 million card trick.
Yeah. So I still call it my $23 million card trick to this day.
Wow. Well, now let's talk about strolling for just a moment. Strolling
Yeah.
is certainly a little bit different than working in restaurants. When you're working at restaurants and table to table, it's a whole different animal. And in a way, of course, and when you're strolling, that you do go from table to table, but typically people are standing with their hands full with food and a drink, and it's hard for them to select a card. So it's a different kind of a thing about how
Yep.
that you engage with them than to begin with. So how do you go about your trick selection for strolling?
Yeah, so the first thing I will say is that even if you are a restaurant worker, you would definitely get a lot out of the book itself because a lot of the things do apply. But I do kind of split off a little bit from the restaurant workers. I consider, I'm coming at it more from like you're doing like a corporate cocktail reception or, a welcome kind of party where, like you said, you're not guaranteed a table, you're not guaranteed good lighting, you're not guaranteed, you're like you have to assume the worst pretty much when you walk into a venue. So what I look for in effects when I'm choosing effects for strolling is can it be done in the hands so I don't need a table? If you have a table, that's fine. You can use it if you want, but I don't have to want to need it, to be able to do my
Sure,
trick. So
sure.
I don't want to have to, worry about, putting my close-up pad down and doing, a ribbon spread and,
Right,
whatever you're doing. I
right.
want to be everything's in the hands. I prefer everything to be up at eye level. So instead of everybody looking down on your cards, you bring them up. So you're doing them up here at eye level because
Hmm.
people are going to be seated usually at either like a round dining table or a high cocktail table. Um, I design things that are pretty much angle proof because that's the other thing is you're very much not in control of your angles. So even though you might be performing for this table right in front of you, there's probably a table 5 feet on your behind, to this side of you on your back, and then
Right,
5 feet on that side on your left that are might be looking in on what you're doing. So you can't do things that are real finger flicking kind of, three fly-ish, kind of, where it's angle kind of sensitive.
right,
So
right.
I pick things that are really bulletproof. I know a lot of workers are really big on instant reset. I don't get so hung up on instant reset. I will still do things that take a little bit of reset. If it's a long, rearrange the entire deck kind of reset, then yes, then that's out. But if
Right.
it's something fairly simple, if it's where I'm walking from one table to the next and I just kind of have my back to the party and I just like down here just kind of, reset my trick,
Sure.
in 10, 20 seconds, that's fine with me. But so things that reset either instantly or quickly, that's another one that I look for. And then yeah, just really hard hitting magic. And the cool thing about doing strolling magic as opposed to stage magic is just the flight time, is just the amount of reps you get in doing it. You can practice your ambitious card routine 20 times in one night in front of a live audience, whereas an illusionist can only do it once or twice
Hmm.
in front of an
Or a
audience. So
classic force.
yeah, so yes, yes, but that's another way. It doesn't have to be a whole trick. It could be one move. You could practice that, a few dozen times in one gig, and so you get really good at things really quickly. You get to iterate quickly, which is really nice about strolling magic.
So, what is your opener to a standing group of people? Let's say you're introducing yourself to a group. there are two couples, men and two women, two men and two women. I
Uh-huh.
mean, there's a different dynamic, obviously, if they're men or they're women, and you might
Yep.
choose a different trick. But let me just ask you, if there is a mixed group right there and they're having cocktails and they're standing, what is your opening trick to them?
The opening trick happens before you even walk up to the table,
Oh,
believe it
really?
or not. Is
Okay.
is you the, and this is just I'm giving you the mindset of what I am when I work is choosing which tables to even walk up to is part of your first trick because if, for all the reasons that you just said, if I mean I've been doing this for so long now that if I walk up I can tell, oh, this is a guy that's trying to get with this girl and I don't want to mess with that, so I'll avoid that table. So being able to very quickly read a table's vibe and their situation,
Hmm.
you
And
want to
figure out
wait.
who's the alpha.
You're right. You have to identify that right away, and you have to treat them differently. Everybody has a different role whenever any social thing. So the first trick, not to be trite, but it happens before I even walk up. It's which table I walk up to. But let's say I find a table, I wait for that little natural lull, where I can tell somebody just made a joke, everybody's laughing, but nobody else has really something else to say, and everybody goes to sip their drink. Bam, that's the perfect moment to walk up and be like, hey. And the first thing I do is I introduce myself. Hi, my name's Jason. Because the first thing you want to do is establish that you belong there. Because, a lot of people will be like, oh, who the heck is this guy? Like, they'll think that you're, a party
Maitre
crasher
d',
or just
maybe.
some weirdo that walked up.
Yeah.
Now, I dress really nice, so that helps because people that automatically is like, okay, this isn't just somebody
You
off the
don't wear a
street.
name
This is
tag?
somebody. I don't wear a name tag, but I definitely look like somebody important.
Hmm.
So I'll usually walk up and I'll keep it. I've learned to be able to play it so I'm a little ambiguous with it. I'll walk up and I'll say, "Is everybody enjoying everything so far tonight?" So now they say yes. And I say, "I know you guys just got here, whatever, but everybody having a good time?" Yes. So now they've said yes twice. And then I say, "Well, I've been hired to come in and show you guys something interesting." So as soon as you say I've been hired to show you something now, what's better is if you can drop the name of their CEO or drop the name of somebody that they know, say, oh, Bob such and such, hired me to come over here and show you something interesting. Well, now it's almost like, the appeal to authority. Now they feel like they have to watch you
Yeah,
because their boss sent you over there.
right.
So any of those little kind of psychological tools you can use. And I usually open, I mean, as silly as it is, I open with the invisible deck. Usually, it's such a strong effect. And and this is advice I give in the book, is I say start with your strongest effect. Just knock them in the teeth as soon as you can, because strolling walk around is a numbers game. You're going to have to do it a lot. You're going to have to get you're going to see a lot of tables, and not every table is going to be into it. You're going to walk up and you might think they're going to be great, and they stink. There's no sense banging your head against the wall when you can just say, "Thank you very much. You guys were great. I'll be around." And there's a table 6 feet over that way that might think that you can walk on water, and you don't know until you walk over there. So I know I've seen other strolling magicians, stick around and be like, no, 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 I'm gonna make you like my magic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it does not work like that usually. So it's a numbers game. So if they're not vibing with you, then you go somewhere else and you move on. But that way too, by doing your best trick first, I know if I don't get the reaction that I know that trick should get, then I'm the one that makes the decision to be like, you know what, I don't think you're vibing with me, and I'll move on. It's rare, but it happens. Sometimes I misread the room or whatever, but that way I know in my heart. And then also the other reason I do it that way is because you never know when you're going to be interrupted. The waiter might bring the food. The CEO all of a sudden wants to give his, speech, or,
Right.
give his award up on the stage, or you just never know. So I want to know that if I perform for a table and I was interrupted and I had to leave after my first trick, I want to know that they saw the best thing I had, and gave him the best, and then and go from there. Usually, if they're into it, I say this in the book that it's the rule of threes. To me, three tricks is the perfect kind of walk around set. So I'll open with something as strong as Invisible Deck. Then the second one, you can get a little bit more story driven and get more, borrow objects, get more, a multi-phase type of effect. And then the third one is just another really kind of kick you in the teeth trick. Like I give the example of ring flight. You're borrowing something, it ends up in an impossible location, and you leave on a high note. Good night, everybody. And I usually end by saying, I'll be here for the next few hours. If you're still here in a little bit, I'll come back and show you some more. But three tricks is usually my perfect set, which is probably like 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes, and you're in, you're out, and you're on to the next table. And the other thing that serves is that the more people that you show magic to at that event, the more likely it is that they will report back to their boss, "Oh my gosh, that magician you hired was awesome. They were great."
Right.
I used to work with Daniel Cross a lot, and he would set up a table and then get probably like 10 people, and he would sit down and do like a 30-minute like close up magic show, for everybody, like, and
Yeah.
just sit at the table. And it was great. It was great magic. But it was those 10 people got to see a half an hour, where in that half an hour, I probably performed for 50 people. And to me, it's just from a business standpoint, it's a little bit smarter to have more people, because it's a numbers game, and it's more people that can report back to the boss, "Oh my gosh, your magician blew our minds." So it's partly a business decision doing it that way. But that's how I prefer to do it.
Well, I remember hearing and reading about Eugene Berger doing paper hat tears. And so
Yep.
at the end of the evening, he could point around and they said, "Did you get around everybody?" "Yes, I did." You can see that
I
everybody
never
was
heard
here.
that. That's really good.
Yeah,
Like visual proof. Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
as far as the rule of three, people often ask, why is that? And I will say that if you're going to be doing a trick to begin with, a lot of times, well, sometimes you're at in a group, at a table, at a restaurant, or wherever, and people are talking, they're really not paying attention. Then you've done the first trick, and then people say, "Oh my gosh," and then they'll go, "What just happened?" And then they'll start to pay attention. And then the
Right.
second one, they'll say, "Oh, I think that they'll start to try to explain the trick to somebody." And then you're on into the third one, and that's when then they react. And it's like, "Oh my gosh," that they
Yep.
should be, paying attention,
Yeah.
to this really. But yeah, it is. And also, I find that I mentioned men and women when I was talking about that. Whenever I would walk up to a group of men, I will do Hundy 500. So that way that I would change ones to hundreds. Obviously, that it's good for men or women, but men are usually into,
Particularly, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it really gets their attention. And then for women, I will do sponge rabbits. I'll say, "Hey, you got a loose hair on your shoulder," and I'll pull, a hair, and then I'll say
Perfect.
splitting hairs, and then go from there.
Perfect. Yeah.
And they just ooh and ah.
Yep.
My other final thing that I always give as a tip is when you're working like in a room like where I was last week, is to start in the middle, because that way that it kind of emanates outwards, because that group is just going to hopefully go crazy, and everybody's
Yep.
going, "What's happening over there? Come over
Yep.
here next," as opposed to being on the outside,
Yep.
because people are usually walking around during cocktails on the perimeter. But if you're on the inside, work your way out, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point too about having people be vocal. So I have it part of my scripted routine is I say, I'll say something like, "Okay, well, if this is your card, then you got to go crazy," or sometimes you can script them into
Prompt
the
them,
show
sure.
so that when it happens, they freak out. All the tables around are watching you, being like, "What is going on over there?" And
Yeah,
it's funny, you'll get when you do walk around gigs, you'll get people that are like you're like evangelists for you,
that's
and they'll
true.
sometimes they'll grab you and they'll be like, "Oh, Johnny has got to see this," and I've been literally grabbed and like drugged to the next table to
Well,
be
and they
like,
want
"You
to see
got to
that
watch
particular
this
trick.
guy."
They want to see
Yeah.
that Hundy 500 again. Do that thing because they want to think, "I'm going to catch him this time." And it's
Yep.
like, "Okay, come over here, do it again." To
Yep,
this
and
guy.
and the less, that's the part that most magicians, even me to this day, I got to be honest, because I'm somewhat of an introvert, as is that feeling of when you first walk up to a table, feeling like you're like interrupting them, and you don't want to, it has a kind of awkward feel to it.
Mhm.
But so that's why if you have somebody that can bring you and introduce you to somebody else and make that introduction to your next table. Now that's one less table that I have to walk up to totally cold. I have a referral. I have somebody that's like, hey, you've got to watch this guy. And it makes your job so much easier. And if you're doing it right, people should be hearing the noise, from the table that you're working at. And then people should be kind of, and sometimes I'll even ask, I'll say, is there anybody else here at this party that you think would like this? And then they'll be like, oh, yeah, Jim, he loves magic. Here, where's Jim? And they'll look around and then they'll be like, here, come here. And they'll bring me over to Jim's table. And now they'll make the introduction. And now that's another table that I avoided that awkward, introducing yourself all together, because now you have an endorsement from somebody that just watched you perform. And it just makes your job, all that much easier.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
A testimonial right there. I mean, you
Yeah,
can't be
right.
any better.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
And I want to kind of end in a different direction, kind of a little bit here as we get to the end, and that is about how that close up, of course, is something that everybody is doing, and young people are getting into, and it's easier entry into magic by buying a deck of cards. And
Yep.
there are close-up tricks every day that people are putting out, Illusionist and Theory 11 and Vanishing Ink, et cetera,
Yep.
which are close-up types of tricks. And you see these young people who are doing them for their friends, and a lot of times the videos are shown like at bars or whatever.
Right.
So my question is, how would someone then be able to parlay their passion from doing some close-up? And I'm thinking now, like you as an 18-year-old young man, I mean, not everybody's going to leave home and after they get out of high school and go to
Sure.
Vegas
Sure.
and be as successful as you are
Yeah.
necessarily, but you've proven that path had worked. But what can young people do? And I'm talking about not just late teens, but 20s and 30s, saying, okay, I've got these skills. How do I turn it into some money? How do I approach and get my first corporate strolling gig?
I mean, to be honest, that is it. That's what the book is all about. It's all about those tools. It's all about the ways that you go about looking for work. It's the type of relationships that you set up with agencies, with destination management companies, cold calling, cold emailing. And it's one of the things, and you touched on it. It's one of the things that I really try to get across in the book, because I think what holds a lot of magicians back is, they love magic. They've been doing magic for a while. They show their family and friends, but the thought of going pro or getting not even full time, but just making money, like
Right,
booking a gig, terrifies them, because they think that they need all of this stuff, or they have to be Shin Lim, or they have to be, whatever, like to
right.
make money with it. And that's one of the biggest myths that I wanted to bust with this book, was that that's just not true. You don't need to know. In fact, I even say in the book, I said, I mean, it's probably an oversimplification, and I don't want to minimize it, but if you have 6 killer tricks, that's a career. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, if you wanted to, if you had 6 good tricks, you could be out there making money doing magic, period. People think you have to have 20, 30, 40 tricks, and you have to have them all on you at the same time, just,
Hmm.
in case. And I go through the book and just show that's just not true. I usually I almost always have 3 sets of 3 with me, so that way I can rotate them. If it's like a longer gig, like this one at Allegiant Stadium I just did was 3 hours. That's kind of a long time, and there wasn't that many people, so I had to rotate my tricks out. But that way I know nobody's seeing the same thing twice. And then I'll throw a few extra things in there. But everything I bring comes like in this little toolbox, this little makeup kit type, sized box, and that's what I carry with me, and I'll switch things in and out. But you need far less magic than you think you do at least start making money doing magic. And if, like I said, I mean, you literally, if you had 6 really good tricks, get started, get out there and do it, because I say this before, there are people that are really, really good magicians that are struggling, that they can't find a way to make it work. And I know lots of just average, mediocre magicians that are making a killing, because they know how the systems work, and they know how to take the things that they do and turn them into income. And I cover, honestly, both scenarios in the book. But that's my overarching thing to answer your question is that you don't need nearly as much magic as you think you do to at least get started doing magic. And then there's no teacher like actually getting out there and doing it. And your first
Flight
few
time.
times,
Yeah.
you're going to be terrified. It's totally normal. You push through it. I do give tips on how to on the mental framework you have to have when you walk up to a table. So I give you the tools to help deal with anxiety and performance stuff and all that. I cover all of that. So I pretty much wrote the book I wish I had when I first started. And I was doing cruise ships for this book took me about a year and a half to write, and I just because I had so much free time on my hands that there's only so many YouTube videos you can just sit and
Sure.
watch mindlessly. So I said, why don't I write about something I know about? And I was like, man, I've been doing walk around for 25 years now. I feel uniquely qualified to speak to talk to this. And there's not a lot of material on it from the magic that's in it to the and definitely not the business side of things. So I thought, why don't I just give every piece of information I know on how to go from doing card tricks for your friends at parties to making either a part-time or if you want to go completely full-time and make magic your livelihood. I don't know of another book like this. I really don't.
When you're talking about having too many things, typically you don't want to go to a gig packed like you have a whole magic um, shop in your pockets and
Yeah,
everything. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you don't need that. I mean, I think back oftentimes about how when some advice I'd gotten early in my career about travel, and that is to after you pack your bags, put back half of your clothing because you're not going to need that. You
Right,
usually
right.
overpack. You don't
Yeah.
need extra sets of whatever or shirts or whatever. My point is same thing like with that. You after you get out and you start performing, and you know pretty much right away. Well, I never got around to doing that, or oh, I could have done this, or but it's like no, everything worked out fine, and you had just the right. You had
Yep.
more than just the right amount. So next time you put back more stuff, so you go out with less and less, so you don't again look so bulky like a traveling magic shop, as I said. And which is another thing I think that is pocket management. And I don't know, did you get into pocket management as
There's an
well as?
entire section in the book about pocket management, why you should never, put a deck of cards in your outside jacket pockets, why different tricks work well because they don't take up any pocket space, where to keep things, how to keep things organized. I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time actually about pocket management because it is as a strolling magician, it's one of the more important things. And I went a good length of my career where I didn't even bring a case with me. I would literally in the car in the parking garage at Mandalay Bay or wherever it was, I would load up all the tricks in my pockets, and I wear a really nice fitted suit, so everything's real tight, so there's not a
Mhm.
lot of room, and
Right.
it still kept the good line of the suit because I knew where to put everything, bulky items like in my back pants pockets or decks of cards on your inner breast pocket instead of the outside pocket because it just makes your suit hang weird and all
It
those little
does.
things that you don't think of when you first get started that just make you keep adding up all those little tiny incremental improvements and suddenly now you're going from somebody that is like they were a good magician to somebody that looks like oh that's a pro, that's a working pro. And it's all those tips that I give in the book that take you those incremental steps to get more and more pro, more and more professional, and more polished.
Yeah, those are all very good tips. Again, when you're walking up to a table, you want to look sharp. You don't want
Yep.
someone to say, "Yeah, he looks like a homeless guy that's got
Right.
his pockets bulging and wide
Right.
open because of the heavy stuff that's in there or whatever." So
Yeah,
yeah,
which
you
I've
want
seen.
to look sharp enough. It's like, wow, you want them to think, "Look at that suit and look at that guy. I wonder what who he is,
Yeah.
or she is. That's another thing is you could have your pockets built inside of your jacket. I've got a lot of things that have been tailored. So anyhow, still keeping on point with young people or people, and I say young to the business, just
Yeah.
getting started.
Yeah.
There are a lot of tips that they can learn later along the way and are included, I'm sure, in the book. But it's important, first of all, to get that first job and to be paid and then say, I can do this. And because work leads to more work. When people see you, then obviously that's your opportunity. If they
Yep.
will allow you to pass out a card, please do.
Yep.
Or there are other things you could do without, tapping your phone. You don't have to use cards anymore. There's so many different ways
Right.
of getting your information out there, or making it as easy as possible, of having just a QR code, different kinds of things, of ways of people to get to you. Or it used to be that I would ask for their card and then try to follow up with that. But boy, that's a whole different podcast, to talk about
I know it really
promotion and
is.
stuff.
And there's more than one way to skin a cat. There everything you listed, all of the above. I do one of my sneaky ways of doing it is I do a trick in my walk around where they have to go like the reveal. So I make a prediction, but they don't know what it is yet, and I reveal it on my Instagram. So I make everybody
Yes,
that's sitting around the table go to my Instagram to find the reveal, and now bam, they're on your Instagram page. So
right.
now they're hopefully, if you're good, they're going
That's
to
a great
follow you.
trick. I
Yeah,
know
they're
which
going
one
to
it
follow
is.
you
Yeah.
right there. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a little hidden gem that I actually don't know if I put that in the book or not. So maybe your readers are getting an exclusive there. But so there's different ways that you can do that. If you're working, I give this advice: if you're working for an agency, do not give out your business card. That's a big no-no in the
Correct.
industry. But if you've booked private, go for it. Pass out your business cards, get their business cards. Caroline Raven in the book, in her interview, talks about how she grabs people's LinkedIn because that's now you have both way communication because you have their LinkedIn and they have your LinkedIn. So and most serious business people are on LinkedIn. They're
Hmm.
not. I've never booked a single gig on Instagram from Instagram. That never.
Hmm.
Not one person has ever contacted me to be like, "Oh, I saw you on Instagram. I want to hire you." Not once. It's that to me, it's a total vanity waste of time. You still have to do it because you have to look legit when people do look you up because they will
Sure.
look up your socials. They will look you up and see, how popular you are. So it is important, but it's not going to be a driver of your bookings. So,
Right.
but LinkedIn could be. So, don't sleep on things like LinkedIn and stuff like that. So, but like you said, to go back to this hypothetical 18, 19-year-old, get out there and just do it as much as you can. Even if in the very beginning, I don't recommend for doing this for too long, because it does take away work from other magicians and it also lowers the bar. People think that they can get magicians for free, but if you have to work, to do a gig for free or for low pay or for a meal or whatever, just get the experience, get the flight time, get going. And then once you do, start raising your rates and start charging more and more for your money. And I'll just tell you, these corporate events that these people throw, and I'm not just talking Vegas. I fly all over the country, and it's the same everywhere. Is you'll go to corporate events where their budget for the entire event is literally in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for
Hmm.
one night. And your fee for walk around is a rounding error in that budget. Like they will literally spend more money on napkins than on
Sure.
you.
Sure.
So don't be afraid to ask for what you think you're worth, because 9 times out of 10 they will give it because they're used to paying that for good entertainment, for good, quality, whatever. I mean, you sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need the money, so you'll take this gig. This is years ago, but you'd be like, oh, I'll take this gig because it seems like they don't have the money, and then you show up to this ballroom that they've tricked out, and they've
Yeah.
hired
Yeah. You
Kevin
think, boy,
Hart
I
to be
underpriced
the
this one.
MC for the event and
Yeah.
whatever, and I'm like, oh my God, I could have added a zero onto the end of my fee, and they wouldn't have even noticed.
Yeah. That's true. One quick tip, and then we'll wrap up over here.
Yeah.
And that is, if you're looking to, for the young people again, to not only get flight time, but and also do a free show, but to do it in the right way, is to go to a luncheon for Rotary, JC's, the
Yeah.
Lions Club, different, or an evening or something like that, because those are business people who are there. And if you can do a stand-up show, all the better. But if you can say, hey, look, while you're having dinner, can I do some entertaining close-up? And that way they will see you and say, hey, we'd like to have you come and do whatever. And you'll do that for free, or just for they'll give you free dinner or something, for that. So that's a good way of making some contacts
Yep.
and getting some experience. And that is, I think, a beautiful, easy launch pad. Every city has these fraternal organizations.
Yep. Chamber of Commerce is a huge one.
Yeah,
BNI is another one. There's a lot of those kinds of groups that, yeah, if you went to it, and they're everywhere. So there's no excuse for like, oh, I don't live in Las Vegas. No, I
right.
promise you, your city has a Chamber of Commerce. So you go to them and you say, hey, I'm just, you can lie if you want to say I'm brand new to the area and say I'm looking to make connections. I'm a magician. Number one, they're going to say how cool, because you're probably the first magician that's ever approached them
That's right.
ever. And number two, you say, why don't you have me come, and I'll tell you what, I'll come to one of the meetings, to one of the mixers, your Monday night mixer or whatever it is, and I'll come and I'll do strolling magic. I'll do walk around magic absolutely free. All I want is to just be able to pass on my business cards and meet and meet
Yep.
local businesses. And I've never had one say no ever. So
Yeah.
that would be a great start jumping off point for trying
Yeah.
to get to
Get
know
in
people
there.
in your area.
Okay. Well, just to wrap up then, the name of your book again is,
Strolling $4.
and where can they go to order this?
You can buy it at jasonbird.store. That's where you can get it. So strolling for dollars, jasonbird.store. You can buy it direct right from me. I have a printer in Canada, two in the US and one in the UK. So if you're ordering from any of those places, it's going to be printed right in your home country, so you don't have to worry about tariffs and outrageous international shipping and all this other stuff. And then there's some other digital things in there too. There's one called the Pro Gig Toolkit, which is like it's 13 different PDF templates for things like a sample contract, a sample script, for when you're talking to somebody on the phone,
Sure.
all the business stuff that people don't like to do, and it's not that much money. I think it's worth it to pick that up in addition to the book, but it's again 583 pages, interviews with 12 of the greatest walk-around magicians out there right now, and there's been nothing but praise. The Genie review came out not that long ago. They raved about it, so it's helping. I get emails every single day of somebody that's like, sometimes all the way up to, you've changed my life. I am now a full-time magician because of your book, and I
That's
can't
great.
thank you enough.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
Well, the name of my podcast is called the Magic Word Podcast. So I come to that point where it's time for you to tell me, what is your word? What is your magic word?
My magic word is start.
Start. Love it.
Just get out there and do it,
Hmm.
because it's don't make perfect the enemy of the good. You've probably, if you're listening to this right now, I can almost guarantee you that you know enough magic that you could start getting out there and start getting work and being a paid magician. And if you need some help on a blueprint on how to exactly do it, pick up strolling for dollars. But just in general, just get out there and start doing it.
That's a good
And
one. Love
yep, and
that.
there's no better advice I could give, is start now.
Yeah. Now's the time.
Now
Yep.
is the time. It's always the time.
Jason, thanks again. I appreciate all the advice. It was, boy, just a quick hour over here. I appreciate everything. And I think everyone listening got a lot out of this then, too. So for the Magic Word
Thank you.
Podcast, that was Jason Bird. This is Scotty out. Well, thank you very much, Jason, for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. And again, I apologize to those who might think this was just a 1 hour commercial. I don't believe that it was. I think he had a lot of information he shared here. And I want to thank him for taking the time to do that, certainly, and for taking the time to write the book and have it available. I want to remind you again, if you are interested in purchasing his book, just go to jasonbird.store, and there you can click on and download and order your book on demand. Now, I mentioned at the first of this episode that this is available also not only for sale, but he has generously agreed to send one copy to a listener. So if you'll go to themagicwordpodcast.com for this week, for this episode, you will see a link there where you can fill in and put your name and email address, and it will go into a spreadsheet. And if your name is randomly selected, then a copy will be sent to you. Now, let me also point out that as he mentioned, this is printed on demand in not only the US, but also the UK and in Canada. So this is not limited then necessarily just to the US, as many of our contests are. So if you are in the UK or in Canada, feel free to fill out the form. You may be having your name drawn and be a winner there as well. So again, go to themagicwordpodcast.com, and there will for this week, and you will see this contest running. Now, I will also say, for those of you who are watching this video kind of later and you missed it, sorry, you'll have to go to his website and actually order the book. But this will run for about 2 weeks, and I will then draw that winner and announce it in an upcoming episode. Well, anyhow, that's about all that we have time for then right now. Again, thank you, Jason, very much for your time and your words. And I hope everyone got a lot out of it as much as I did. So for the Magic Word Podcast, stay well, get booked, and remember to just start. This is Scotty out.